You will face it. Not today, not tomorrow. But one day when the mask cracks, when the applause stops, when the noise dies down, you will stand in silence and realize something terrifying. There is nothing left to hold you. This is the void, the place where all illusions collapse, the stage where every weak man breaks. You've felt glimpses of it, the sleepless night staring at the ceiling, the betrayal that left you hollow. The day you realized the people you trusted never truly knew you. In those moments, the ground beneath you vanished. You weren't just sad. You weren't just lost. You were staring into emptiness. Society tells you to run from this place. Distract yourself. Consume more. Fake a smile. Pretend everything is fine. But deep inside, you know the truth. The void will return. And next time, it will demand everything from you. Carl Jung called this the confrontation with the unconscious, the point where you meet the parts of yourself you've buried. Nietzsche described it as staring into the abyss. Schopenhauer said life itself is a pendulum between pain and boredom, and the void is where both collapse into meaninglessness. Most people never survive this stage. They drown in it. They numb themselves with substances, endless scrolling, shallow relationships. They pretend to heal but stay broken. But a rare few step into the void and do not run. They endure it. They burn in its fire. And on the other side, they are no longer ordinary. They are no longer readable. They are no longer weak. They become something else. Untouchable. The void is not punishment. It is not failure. It is the final test of your soul. Pass it and you are reborn. Fail it and you remain trapped forever. This video is not entertainment. This is initiation. You will learn why the void is sacred, why it is dangerous, and why only those who face it without fear ever truly rise. The question is not whether you will face the void. The question is whether you will survive it. You were raised to believe emptiness is failure. If your schedule is empty, you are lazy. If your wallet is empty, you are broken. If your heart is empty, you are unlovable. But the void is not literal nothingness. It is the collapse of the false self. It is when every identity you wore like armor, the good student, the loyal son, the dependable friend, shatters. And what remains is silence. This is why the void terrifies people. They sense that beneath their masks, there is nothing solid. And when that nothingness arrives, when the facade finally crumbles, they panic. Jung saw it clearly. He wrote that a man who refuses to confront his inner emptiness becomes possessed by it. He projects his shadow onto the world, blaming others, hating others, fearing others, because he cannot face what stares back at him when he closes his eyes. You have felt this too, those nights where you scrolled endlessly, not for pleasure, but to avoid silence. Those days when the thought of being alone felt unbearable. That isn't boredom. That is the void whispering. And you ran. But here is the secret society never tells you. Despair is initiation. The descent is the doorway. In Buddhism, emptiness is not cursed, but sacred. Sunyata. The realization that the self you cling to is an illusion. The ego collapses, and when it does, you glimpse freedom. But only if you dare to stay in the silence. Modern psychology calls it depression, a crushing sense that nothing matters. And most treat it like a disease to be numbed. Pills, distractions, endless surface-level fixes. Yet Jung, Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, they all knew what society denies. When meaning collapses, a deeper meaning waits to be born. You mistake the collapse for the end, but it is the beginning. You mistake despair for death, but it is initiation. The void is the stripping away of everything false. It is brutal, it feels like loss, but loss is the price of truth. Look at history. Nietzsche stared into the abyss and declared, "God is dead." He tore away the last illusions of his time and stood in the silence. Schopenhauer described existence itself as a cruel joke, yet by facing it, he exposed the machinery of human desire more clearly than anyone else. Even Jung himself, in his confrontation with the unconscious, nearly lost his sanity. He wrote of nights filled with visions and terror, and yet, that descent gave birth to his greatest insights. Individuation, the shadow, the archetypes that now define modern psychology. The void is always the beginning of greatness, and this is why weak men fear it. They cannot bear to lose their illusions. They cling to false validation, false happiness, false strength. But the strong, or rather, the becoming strong, let it all collapse. They endure the silence. They walk through despair. And when you endure it, you discover what no one else dares to know. Emptiness is not your enemy. Emptiness is your teacher. The void is the sacred fire that burns away every mask until only the real remains. You fear losing yourself, but it is the false self that dies, and that death is the first step toward becoming untouchable. The void does not appear empty for long. Once the false self collapses, something begins to rise from the depths. Shapes, faces, voices you thought were buried, every weakness you denied, every rage you suppressed, every shame you tried to forget. This is the shadow, and in the void, it has nowhere else to hide. Jung called the shadow the sum of everything you reject in yourself, the anger you repress to look nice, the envy you deny to look humble, the lust you bury to look pure. You lock these away, believing you have escaped them. But when the mask breaks, when you fall into the void, they come back, not as whispers, but as chains. Most men fail here. They mistake the shadow for defeat. They see their darkest impulses and panic. They say, "This is not me." They run, they medicate, they deny, and the more they deny, the stronger the shadow becomes. It owns them. They become slaves to the very forces they tried to escape. Look at Nietzsche, a man who wrestled openly with his shadow. His writings were born from rage, loneliness, desire for power, and contempt for weakness. He did not hide these impulses. He sharpened them into philosophy. Yet even he, near the end, collapsed under the weight of it. The shadow will break even the strongest if they refuse to integrate it fully. Think of the soldier returning from war. He has seen death. He is killed. Society tells him to move on, pretend, smile. But the shadow follows. Nightmares, rage, guilt. If he denies it, it devours him. If he faces it, he learns something most men never will: the human capacity for destruction and the human need for discipline. Machiavelli saw the truth clearly. He wrote that men are not moved by goodness, but by fear and self-interest. A leader who denies this is destroyed. A leader who accepts the shadow in himself and in others gains power. That is why the prince still terrifies people today. It unmasks the polite illusions and shows the predator beneath. And what about you? When your shadow surfaces in the void, what do? Do you deny your envy while secretly hating those who succeed? Do you bury your anger only to explode when it's too late? Do you pretend to be moral while hiding the same impulses you condemn in others? This is the trap. The void forces you to see your shadow. If you run, you remain broken. If you integrate it, you rise. To integrate does not mean to indulge. It means to accept. Yes, this is part of me. Yes, I am capable of hatred, of cruelty, of lust, of envy. But because I face it, it cannot control me. Because I see it, I am no longer blind. The weak deny, the strong confront, the blind stumble, the awake choose. This is the test the void presents. Not whether you can smile in the light, but whether you can stand still in the dark and not flinch when your shadow speaks. Jung warned, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The void is where this happens. It is the mirror that shows you what you really are. And in that mirror, most men turn away. Do not turn away. Because if you survive this stage, the shadow no longer hunts you. It becomes your ally. And the man who has befriended his own darkness is a man no one else can control. The void is not merciful. Once the shadow rises and the illusions collapse, there is no applause, no comfort, no savior. Everything you once leaned on, praise, friends, distractions, the false promises of society, is stripped away. And what remains is only you. This is the crucible, the furnace, the place where men either collapse or are remade. Most collapse. They run into addictions, drowning themselves in alcohol, pills, or endless scrolling. They trade truth for comfort. They would rather sedate their pain than face it. They look alive, but inside they are already dead. But the few who endure, they are forged. History remembers them. Prophets who wandered deserts with nothing but silence. Thinkers who endured exile and rejection. Leaders who were hated in their time, only to become legends after. They did not run from the void, they endured it. And from that endurance came power. Jung himself lived through years of visions that nearly tore his mind apart. He confronted the chaos directly, recording every terrifying image in what became the Red Book. What others would have called madness, he treated as initiation. From that crucible came the foundations of modern psychology. This is the pattern. The void strips you of everything external so that the only strength left is internal. When you have nothing left to lean on, you discover whether you can stand at all. Do you see the difference? The ordinary man seeks validation. He wants likes, approval, comfort. Without it, he collapses. The rare man stands without applause. He endures without distraction. He holds his ground when nothing supports him. That is why the void is sacred. It is the test that cannot be faked. You can lie to others. You can wear a mask. You can play strong on the outside. But in the void, every mask burns. Every lie crumbles. You either endure or you don't. And if you endure, something happens. The pain no longer frightens you. The silence no longer weakens you. You no longer need anyone to tell you who you are. You no longer need society's approval to breathe. This is where the untouchable mind is born. A mind that no flattery can control. A mind that no insult can break. A mind that has endured the fire and carries its scars as proof of strength. The void is the crucible. It destroys the weak. But for the few who endure, it forges a man who cannot be moved, and you must decide. Will you be among the countless who collapse, or among the rare who rise? The void does not just strip you, it kills you. Not your body, yourself. The fragile identity you've built, the one stitched together from approval, fear, masks, and borrowed beliefs, cannot survive here. This is why the void feels like death. Because it is. Carl Jung lived this death during his confrontation with the unconscious. Night after night, visions came to him. Serpents, floods, ancient gods rising from the depths of his mind. He thought he was losing his sanity. And, in a sense, he was. His old self, the polished academic, the safe doctor, the man defined by reputation, collapsed. In its place emerged something terrifying, something greater. The man who would give the world the map of the psyche. Myths echo the same truth. Osiris, torn to pieces and scattered, only to be reassembled and reborn as Lord of the Underworld. Odin, hanging from the world tree for 9 nights, pierced by a spear, dying to himself to awaken with the runes of wisdom. Jesus, crucified, descending into the tomb, and rising transformed. Every culture, every age whispers the same law. Rebirth demands death. The old must be sacrificed. The familiar must be burned. And here lies the brutality. Most cannot bear it. They cling to their old self, to comfort, to safety, to shallow identities. They want transformation without death. They want rebirth without sacrifice. And so they remain trapped, half alive, forever pretending. But if you accept the death, if you let the old self burn, something awakens. You no longer need to act strong because weakness has died. You no longer need to pretend to be good because your morality is no longer borrowed. You no longer need to cling to identity because a truer identity rises from the ashes. Yes, it is lonely. Yes, it is terrifying. Yes, it feels like annihilation. But understand this. Annihilation is the passage. Destruction is the doorway. When Jung emerged from his visions, he was not the same man. When Odin stepped down from the tree, he was no longer blind. When the tomb opened, the old self was gone. What stood there was something untouchable. And so, it will be with you. If you dare to let the old self die, the man who rises will be unrecognizable. Not to society, not to your past, not even to yourself. That is the price of the void. That is its terror. That is its gift. The question is not whether you will survive the death of the old self. The question is whether you will allow it to happen at all. The void is not just another struggle. It is not like the obstacles you faced before. Money problems, heartbreak, rejection. Those can be endured with distraction, with bravado, with masks. But the void is different. This is the final test, and here's why. You cannot fake it. In every other part of life, people get away with pretending. They wear masks. They act confident while trembling inside. They perform kindness while seething with resentment. They claim strength while leaning on others to hold them up. But in the void, all of it burns. Every mask collapses. Every excuse dissolves. Every false identity is stripped naked. There is nowhere to hide. That's why it is called the final test of your soul. Because it does not measure what you appear to be. It measures what you are. Jung called this process individuation. The confrontation with every hidden part of the psyche until a man becomes whole. Not polished, not perfect. Whole, integrated, real. Most never reach this point. They stop halfway. They chase healing as a performance. They meditate for validation. They seek therapy to be told they are good enough. They want light without shadow, strength without sacrifice, wholeness without fire. And so, they remain mediocre, forever circling, never transforming. But when you stand in the void, you have no such luxury. The final test forces you to decide. Will you integrate or will you collapse? Think of Nietzsche staring into the abyss. He warned that when you gaze too long, the abyss also gazes back. Most men flinch, they look away, they retreat into comfort, but the rare man does not turn. He endures the stare, and in that endurance, he changes. Think of Machiavelli, exiled, disgraced, stripped of reputation and power. Many would have drowned in bitterness, but in his exile, he wrote The Prince, a book that still terrifies and instructs rulers centuries later. The void became his test, and he passed it by facing reality without illusions. And now, think of yourself. You may already feel the pull of the void, the silence, the despair, the emptiness where nothing external satisfies you anymore. That is the signal. That is the gate. The final test does not ask, "Are you happy?" It asks, "Are you real?" And being real costs everything. It costs the masks you love. It costs the lies that protect you. It costs the illusions that comfort you. That is why so many fail, because they cannot imagine living without those false protections. But if you pass through, if you accept the death of the old self, integrate your shadow, and endure the silence, you emerge as something no one else can touch, a whole being, a man who does not need validation, who does not beg for approval, who does not fear rejection. This is individuation. This is wholeness. This is what Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But privileges are not handed out. They are earned through fire, through emptiness, through the void. And so, you stand here at the edge of your soul's trial. One path returns you to mediocrity. The other leads you through fire into untouchable strength. You already know which one most men choose. The question is, which one will you? You have walked through emptiness. You have faced your shadow. You have endured the crucible. You have allowed the old self to die. And now, at last, you stand on the other side of the void. Do you see it? The void was never the end. It was the passage. It was the trial that separated the weak from the rare, the ordinary from the sovereign. Because now, you are no longer dependent. You no longer beg for validation. You no longer tremble at rejection. You no longer fear being misunderstood. You are untouchable. This does not mean you are invincible in body. It means your center cannot be shaken. Society cannot manipulate you with promises of praise or threats of isolation. People cannot control you with flattery or shame. Even your own weaknesses no longer own you because you have faced them, integrated them, and burned them into strength. This is the transformation few ever reach. They stop at healing. They stop at coping. They stop at pretending. But you went through the fire. You took the final test. And because you did, you have become something else entirely. Jung called this individuation. Nietzsche called it becoming who you are. Machiavelli would call it sovereignty. Different words, same reality. The man who emerges from the void is beyond the herd. Think of every prophet, every thinker, every visionary. They all passed this stage. They all endured exile, ridicule, rejection. They all faced the silence of the void. And when they returned, they no longer needed the approval of men. That is why their words still live, centuries later. You are no longer just someone healing. You are no longer a seeker. You are the rare one who has crossed. And the world will feel it. Your presence will shift. People will sense something different in you. Something they cannot manipulate, cannot define, cannot break. Some will fear you. Some will hate you. Some will be drawn to you like moths to a flame. This is the price and the gift. You are no longer ordinary. You are no longer reachable by the chains that bind the herd. You are sovereign. You are untouchable. The void was the final test of your soul, and you passed. Enough running, enough numbing, enough pretending. You have heard the truth. The void is coming, or it has already arrived. You cannot escape it. You cannot negotiate with it. You cannot fake your way through it. You have only two choices: collapse and remain mediocre, or step into the fire and emerge untouchable. This is not motivation. This is not entertainment. This is initiation. The void is the rite of passage that separates the rare from the herd. The question is no longer, will you face it? The question is, will you cross? From this moment forward, you cannot lie to yourself. You know the truth. You have been called. And if you are ready, if you are one of the few who dares to take the final test, then join us. Not as a casual viewer, not as someone passing time, but as part of a brotherhood of rare minds who refuse to remain ordinary. Step into the void. Pass the test. Become untouchable.